The credit card machine made a sound so small yet so brutal that it felt louder than the chandeliers above, a sharp electronic refusal that cut through the luxury of the room and froze time itself. In that moment, surrounded by polished marble, hushed waiters, and people who measured worth by watches and shoes, the billionaire stood exposed. His card had declined, and with it, the image he had spent a lifetime building began to crack. Before this story goes any further, pause for a heartbeat. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that even the smallest soul can change the biggest life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The man was known everywhere, though rarely by his face. His name was printed on buildings, investment reports, and magazine covers, always followed by numbers so large they felt unreal. He had grown up with nothing, clawed his way to everything, and somewhere along the climb had learned to trust numbers more than people. Wealth had become armor, status his language, and control his oxygen. That night, the restaurant was chosen not for hunger but for ritual. He always dined there when he needed to remind himself who he was. The maitre d' knew his name, the waiters knew his preferences, and the air itself seemed to bend politely around him. Until it didn't. The decline was supposed to be impossible. It was a black card, one that promised access without question. But markets had shifted that afternoon, a silent chain reaction triggered by decisions made oceans away. Accounts were frozen pending review, numbers locked behind algorithms that did not care about reputation. The staff stood still, caught between politeness and protocol. The billionaire felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest, not fear of poverty, but fear of being seen. Seen without the shield. Seen as just a man. Across the room, near the entrance where the light was dimmer and the tables were smaller, sat a little girl no one had noticed before. She could not have been more than 8 years old. Her dress was clean but worn thin at the edges, and her shoes were scuffed from long walks on unforgiving sidewalks. She sat alone, her feet swinging slightly above the floor, a half-empty glass of water in front of her and a small bowl of soup she had been slowly nursing as if it were something precious. She was there because the cold outside had been cruel that evening, and the restaurant door had been open just long enough for her to slip in unnoticed. The billionaire did not see her at first. His world had narrowed to the table, the card, the murmured apologies of the staff. His thoughts raced through contingency plans, assistants to call, favors to invoke. Pride wrestled with urgency. He could have laughed it off, signed something, left. But the silence stretched, and silence has a way of stripping people bare. For the first time in decades, he felt small. The little girl watched him with wide, thoughtful eyes. She did not know what a billionaire was. She only saw a man whose shoulders had sagged, whose face looked suddenly tired, like the faces she saw every day in shelters and bus stops. She saw the way his hands trembled, just slightly, as he reached again for the card as if it might change its mind. Something stirred in her chest, something older than logic and stronger than caution. Her life had been a series of quiet losses. A mother gone too soon, a father swallowed by the city's indifference. She moved between relatives and temporary homes, learning early that promises were fragile things. Yet somewhere along the way, she had learned a different lesson too, one her mother had whispered during better days, that kindness was never wasted, even when you had almost nothing. Especially then. She slid off her chair and walked toward the front, her steps small but steady against the polished floor. The staff noticed her too late, their attention pulled in too many directions. The billionaire noticed her only when she was beside his table, a small presence in a very large space. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a handful of crumpled bills and coins, the kind collected slowly, painfully, one act of restraint at a time. It was everything she had saved for the week, meant for food and bus fare and maybe, if she was lucky, a small treat at the end of it. Without ceremony, without understanding the scale of what she was interrupting, she placed the money on the table. The sound it made was soft, almost apologetic. In that instant, the room changed. The waiters froze not out of protocol but shock. The maitre d' forgot his rehearsed professionalism. The billionaire stared at the small pile as if it were something holy. The little girl did not explain herself. She did not need to. Her eyes met his, not with pity, but with certainty. She believed, with the unshakable faith of a child, that when someone needed help, you helped. The amount did not matter. The gesture did. Something broke open inside the man then, something that had been sealed shut for years by success and suspicion. He felt heat rise behind his eyes, a sensation he had trained himself to ignore long ago. This was not charity as he understood it, not a tax-deductible line item or a gala photo. This was sacrifice, raw and unfiltered, offered without expectation of return. It unsettled him more than the declined card ever could. The manager intervened quickly, comping the meal, waving away the issue with practiced grace now that a narrative of generosity had replaced one of embarrassment. But the billionaire barely noticed. His attention was fixed on the girl and the realization blooming painfully in his chest. He had measured wealth by accumulation, by how much he could secure and protect. Yet here was a child with almost nothing, willing to give everything she had in her pocket to a stranger simply because she sensed his need. The night did not end with applause or cameras. There were no viral videos, no immediate headlines. The girl was gently guided back to her seat, her soup now cold but untouched by regret. The billionaire left soon after, declining the usual courtesies. Outside, the city hummed as it always did, indifferent and relentless. But inside him, something had shifted. In the days that followed, his accounts were unfrozen, his losses mitigated. The crisis passed as quickly as it had come. Yet he found himself unable to return to routine. Board meetings blurred. Numbers felt hollow. His thoughts kept returning to the small hand releasing those crumpled bills, to the calm certainty in the girl's eyes. He began asking questions his assistants found strange. About shelters. About foster systems. About the invisible lives lived in the shadows of his skyscrapers. Weeks later, he returned to the restaurant at the same hour, hoping against reason. She was not there. He came back again, and again, until the habit turned into something else entirely. He started visiting shelters quietly, without press or entourage, watching, listening. He learned her story piece by piece, careful not to turn it into a spectacle. When he finally found her, she did not recognize him at first. To her, he was just another adult with a tired face. What followed was not a fairy tale rescue but a long, deliberate commitment. He funded programs that focused not just on food and beds, but on stability, education, and dignity. He did not put his name on every building. He learned to give without needing credit. The girl was given opportunities, not as repayment, but as recognition of her worth. Tutors, a safe home, the space to simply be a child again. She flourished not because of money alone, but because someone finally paid attention. Years passed. The billionaire aged, softened at the edges. He still worked, still built and invested, but with a different compass. Decisions were filtered through a question he had never asked before that night: who does this help? The girl grew into a young woman with a quiet strength, her kindness tempered by experience but never erased. She volunteered where she once sought shelter, carrying forward the lesson that had changed both their lives. And now, as this story draws close, if it has reached something tender inside you, if it has reminded you that goodness can come from the least expected place, take a moment to engage with this video. Like it, share it, and let others feel what you're feeling right now. Just before the ending, here is a special request. Comment below with a single word that represents what this story made you feel. Hope, kindness, faith, or even tears. Let that word stand as your quiet promise to the world. In the end, the unthinkable was never about the money placed on that table. It was about a mirror held up to a man who thought he had seen everything. A declined card stripped away illusion, but a poor little girl's kindness rebuilt something far more valuable than wealth. It rebuilt a heart. And sometimes, that is how the world changes, not with grand speeches or massive fortunes, but with a small hand, a brave gesture, and the courage to care when it would be easier not to.